Hello and welcome to another episode. Before we begin, let me say thank you for your support already in this project and let's keep the episodes going. Let's see what we're going to build in this episode. We're going to build a project regarding a simple page application, or let me say a single page application, which is this right here. So it's going to be divided in two parts, so the left side and the right side. We're going to demonstrate how we can register a user. Let me say that this project will not contain an API call, although it contains all the front-end code regarding the registration of a user and the form. As we can see, the user can select the photo for the profile, he can type the full name and the email, and lastly the phone number. For the email we're going to use a pattern, of course, and for the phone number we're going to use a library that is called sk-tel-input. Let's see all these interesting things and let's begin this episode. We're going to see the software architecture for the front end. So let's see this. So we're going to have a start page that will hold all the code, and we're going to divide the code into the left side component, the right side component, the user info that will contain all the inputs as we already seen, and inside the user info component we're going to have the basic input component that will provide the full name input and the email input, and lastly the select profile image component that of course will help the user select the user profile. Now, lastly, alongside all the pages and the components, we're going to have a helper service that will provide all the general helpful methods and two interfaces, the user information interface and the profile image interface. Now let's begin the coding part. So let's close this and let's start coding. So first of all, we're going to have the global CSS file that we're going to use for the general CSS of the project. First of all, let's set up a global font family like this. Don't worry, the font that is going to be used, it's going to be included in the description of this episode. And let's use now the global font family everywhere in the project like this. And after that, we're going to set up some general CSS that we're going to use in the entire project. So it's going to be like this. Don't worry about that. All of this is going to be used inside the project and it's going to be the description of this episode. This is the CSS. And now let's include this family inside the theme. So let's generate a folder. It's going to be called fonts. Like this, and let's bring the font inside here. So let's bring this font right here. Okay, and the font is added. The global file is correctly set up, and now of course let's navigate to the index file and let's change right here the title. Of course gonna be the our app. And also let's change the icon of the tab of the browser like this. It's going to be the welcome.png file from the images. Now, of course, inside the assets folder, we need to create the images directory like this that will host all the images for this project. So as you can see, we have all the images for this project. Don't worry about this. All the images are going to be included in the description for this episode. Now we have all the images and we can continue and set up the global language configuration for the project. First of all, let's create a directory that we hold the JSON files for the languages. Now we're going to simply have a single file for the English.json file like this. Now, as you can see, this file contains all the necessary tags and texts that we're going to use inside the project. So now this is completed and let's navigate, or first of all, let's install the necessary libraries for the language and for sk-tel-input. So let's install the ngx translate core and the HTTP loader like this. So let's wait for a moment for these to install. So they're installed successfully, and now let's install, of course, the sk-tel-input like this, npm install sk-tel-input. This library is going to provide all the necessary UI and functionality for the tel input of the form. Now all the installations are completed, and now we can return and continue with the language configuration. So let's navigate to the app module file right here, the app module, and we're going to do the following, of course, for the language configuration. So we're going to export a function like this, http loader factory, like this. It's going to take an argument of http, which is going to be, of course, http client, like this. Going to return a new translate http loader, this with http, of course, the location of the JSON files. So it's going to be assets i18n, of course, like this, and it's going to be of type JSON, like this. This is ready, and now we can navigate to the imports array right here, and let's include the translate module like this, and it's going to be for root with this configuration. So it's going to be the loader, and we're going to have provide of translate loader like this, a use factory of the http loader factory that we have already defined, and lastly the depth is going to be the http client like this. And lastly, we're going to provide the provide http client right here inside the providers after this bracket. So it's going to be provide http client like this. So the setup for the languages is almost complete. Now the only remaining thing is navigate to the app component file right here and make the initial default language. So right here we're going to have a method, so it's going to call this dot initialize app. Let's define this method. So initialize app. So this method, of course, makes all the necessary initialization. When the platform is ready, platform like this. When the platform is ready, we're gonna have to set up the language, set the default language. So this dot set initial language, we're gonna have another method, initial language like this, and with the code, so dot en like this. And now let's set up this method. So set initial language with the language code as a parameter like this, and set the default language. We're gonna have to find another injection. It's gonna be the public translate like this, and it's gonna be, of course, of translate service like this. And right here we're gonna say this dot translate dot set default lang. It's gonna be the language code like this. And lastly, this dot translate dot use the language code. Let's also add a useful comment right here and say this method sets the browser language. So with this, the language configuration is now complete, and we can continue to the next functionality. Now let's continue with the proper setup and the architecture for the project. At this point, we do no longer need the home page. So let's delete it and let's start from scratch. So delete this page, and we need also to do a proper routing right here. So first of all, before fixing this error right here, which is a simple one, let's create some necessary folders. So it's going to be the pages folder, it's going to be the components folder, and lastly we're going to have a services folder like this. So this is going to be a proper setup. Let's create our start page, which is going to be, as we already seen the architecture, the only page of this application. So let's generate a page inside the pages folder, and let's call it start like this. So this is going to be the start page. Okay, and now let's fix this error right here. So this is no longer needed about the home page. So let's erase it, and simply for the start of the application, let's redirect to the start page like this. the app routing now is fixed and complete. This is the app module. Also, we can close this. Let's continue with the components and the generation of the components specifically. Now, as we already seen, we have a plethora of components. So let's create them. So generate a component inside the components folder. And let's create the basic input component as we already seen. So basic input like this. This is going to be the input for the email and the full name. So the basic input is now generated, as we can see right here. We have the basic input, and let's define also right here a standalone to false. As we're going to see, we're going to generate a component module for this. So the basic input is complete. Now let's create the next components. So inside the components folder, we're gonna have a start page folder, and inside there we're gonna have the left side component like this. Let's generate this, and of course we're going to have the right side component. So these are the main components of the start page. So inside here, start page, let's also define right here the standalone to false, and let's do the same work for the right side component like this. So we're going to have a standalone to false. So these are completed. Let's continue with the generation of the components for the right side component. And as we already have seen, and let's be reminded of once more. So this is the architecture. As we can see, for the right side, we have the user info component right here, and we have the basic input component that we already generated, and the select profile image component. So let's continue. So the right side, we're gonna have the select profile image component. So let's create it. And of course, the user info component. So now we have all the necessary components. Again, let's do the same work for the user info component with the standalone right here and the select profile image like this. So now all the components are completed, and we can proceed and generate a component master module inside the components folder. So let's create right here a TypeScript file, and let's name it as component master module. And let's see what we're going to have right here. This is a component module. So of course we need to say that it's an ng module, and let's do the configuration like this. Of course, first of all, we need a declarations array. We need an imports array like this, and we need an exports array like this. Let's declare, of course, our components. So we're gonna have the basic input component like this, the left side component like this, the right side component, the user info component, and lastly the select profile image component. In order for this to work, of course, we need to export these components like this, and it's gonna be used inside all of our project. And of course, let's define the class because I've forgotten it. So component master module and the brackets. Okay. Now, lastly, we need to set up the imports in order for these components to work. So we're gonna have the common module, the Ionic module, the forms module, the reactive forms module for the form, the sk-tel-input module, that is a special module from the library for the tel-input that we're gonna see in the continuation of this project. So sk-tel-input module, and lastly, we're gonna have the translate module in order to set up the translation of our texts inside the project. So translate module like this, and the comma, of course. At this moment, also the component master module is completed. And lastly, for the component master module, we need to declare it inside the app module. So we're going to say the component master module like this inside the start page. So pages right here in the start page like this. We're going to have, of course, the translate module and the component master module like this. So all the initial implementation and configuration is completed, and now we can start by writing inside the start page of our front-end code. We can close all these right here. We're gonna see them in a minute. And let's start inside the start page HTML and the start page TypeScript file. Let's set up right here the standalone files also for the start page. And now let's define all the helper service that we already have seen that's going to provide some general and helpful methods. So let's generate the service. So service inside the services folder, and it's going to be the helper service. So let's define this service, and let's start and define if a helpful variable, so local and global variables. So it's going to be the trace log variable. That's initially is going to be equal to 1, like this. Let's continue, and we're going to define a console handler method like this, that it's going to help us to console all the necessary data. It's going to have 2 parameters, and the second parameter is going to be optional. So this method is the console handler. And what we're going to have, so let's check, of course, the trace log. So this dot trace log, if it is different than 0, this means that we're going to console. So console.log the data, and let's check if we have the data 2. If the data 2, like this, is different than undefined, it means that we have some data. So let's console log this data, the data 2, like this. So this is the console handler method. And now let's continue and define 2 methods that are going to help us with the check of the contents of any variable. So the first method is called check undefined null, this, and we're going to have, of course, an argument of input given, like this, of type any. This method is going to return the opposite of input given, like this. Input given is equal to undefined, or input given is equal to null, like this. This method checks if the input parameter is null or undefined. So as you can see, the comments on the code are really helpful, both for ourselves and for third developers that might write on this project. So please write some comments that will help also yourself and others. So let's continue. Check necessary cases, like this. So also this method is going to have an argument of input given, and this method is going to be similar to the other method. Here we're gonna return, of course, again the opposite of input given is equal to undefined or null, like the previous one, but also right here we're gonna check if is equal to the empty string, like this. Input given is equal to the empty string. Also, let's place a comment for ourselves and future usage, like this. So with this, the helper service is now complete, and we can continue and define and generate the start page. Right here, we're gonna have some helpful variables for the screen height and the screen width in order to be more reactive. Screen necessary fields, like this. We're gonna have the screen width, it's gonna be a number, and the screen height, also a number. Now let's define a method. So we're going to have the host listener. On window resize, we're going to have the following event, like this. So get screen size, like this. Of course, we're going to have an event. We're going to set up the variables. So this dot screen width is going to be window. It's going to be the window inner width, like this. And we're going to have this dot screen height. It's going to be the window inner height. Let's import, of course, this, and we can erase this right here, which is not used. Let's also right here use this method inside the constructor to initially set up the screen width and height. So set up the screen size, like this. So this dot get screen size, like this. Now let's continue with the CSS for this page. The CSS is gonna be this right here, and let's of course explain it. So the background for the content is going to be the light blue basic background, as it is from the variables SCSS file. We're going to have a basic grid home for the home, and we're going to set up a max width in order to not expand to a full size width when we have, let's say, very big screen sizes. And of course, we're going to set up also the larger width and the master welcome grid for the grids of this page. So this is the CSS, and let's continue now with the HTML for this page. So the start page HTML right here. We do not need this iron header right here. We also don't need the full screen size, and we also don't need the header. So we only need these elements. Let's set up the basic grid that is going to host all the functionality and the view. So basic grid, we're going to have an iron grid with the class of basic grid home like this. Let's also limit the width. So we're going to have an ng class with the screen width, and if the screen width is lower than 1300 pixels, we're going to have the larger width of the grid, and this is meant for tablet usage. So lower than 1300 pixels, let's use the larger width. So let's continue and define an iron row, and inside here we're going to have another grid, and for this grid the class is going to be the master welcome grid like this. And now let's continue and define the general row. Also, comments in the HTML contents are really helpful. That can help you divide the functionality visually, you and other developers, of course. So general row, and we're going to have an iron row like this. And inside here we're going to have two columns that will define the left side component and the right side component. We're going to have a left column, and of course we're going to have a right column. So for the left column we're going to have an iron col like this, and it's going to be of size equal to 5 like this, and it is only going to be visible if the screen width is greater than 1000 pixels. And this is for reactive purposes, and we're going to see how this reacts a tablet screen size all the way to a large screen size. So it's going to be visible if the screen width specifically, is larger than 1000 pixels. So inside here we're going to have the app left side component like this. So let's continue and define the right column. So again, we're going to have an iron col, and the size is going to be a variable size, a dynamic size. It's going to be dependent to the screen width. So if the screen width is larger than 1000 pixels, it's going to have a 7 size, and if it is lower than 1000 pixels, so a tablet or a mobile, it's going to have a 12 size, so all the available size for the column. Lastly, inside here we're going to have the app right side component like this. So this code right here concludes the implementation for the start page, and now let's see how this is presented in the screen. So let's serve this project and let's see the result. So let's wait for a moment to generate and do all the necessary work in order to present the result. So right here is the components. So as you can see, we have the left side component and the right side component. Now the reason that this page has a dark background is that we have not already defined our variable.css file. So let's do it really quick. So let's navigate to the variables.css files and let's bring all the necessary colors. So first of all, we need to define the root, and inside here let's bring all the necessary colors. Now don't worry, all these colors are going to be included in the description and the GitHub repo. We're going to have all these colors right here. These right here are the basic colors, and then we have our custom app colors right here. We saved the project has refreshed, and let's see the result. So this is the result right here. As you can see, we have a light background, and right here we have the left side works. It is not easy to see because it is white, and the right side works. It is right here. So our two components are working, our page is working. Let's check if we have an error. No errors. Great. And now let's continue with the implementation of the left side component and the right side component. Now let's continue and start implementing the left side component. So let's close all this. We do not need them anymore. The package, the index, and the global, of course. And let's leave this, and as we're going to use it in a moment. Let's define the left side component and let's implement it. So let's navigate to the left side component. Now, as you can remember, the left side component has only a title, a subtitle, and an image. Right here in the component, we do not need to define anything. It's gonna be, the left side is only for appearance sake. So let's close this and define the component HTML and the CSS. So the CSS for the left side component, it's gonna be these right here. So let's paste it and let's explain it. So we're gonna have a master grid. As we can see, we have two labels, one for the title and one for the subtitle. And lastly, we're gonna have a schema, master schema div that will contain our SVG image. And for lower screen sizes, we're gonna lower also the size of the font size of the labels, as we can see right here. So this is the CSS for the left side component. And now let's proceed and define the left side component HTML. We denote this right here. So let's define a grid. Of course, this is not correct. So we're gonna have the welcome grid, and let's also place a useful comment right here. And of course, this grid is gonna have the class of left side master grid. And now let's continue and define the title and the subtitle. So again, a useful comment. So we're gonna have a row. This row is gonna have simply a width of 100% like this. We're gonna have a column, and inside here we're gonna have another two rows, one for the title and one for the subtitle. So we're gonna have an iron row, and inside here we're gonna have a label for the title. Now again, this row gonna have a width of 100%, and this label is gonna have the label title welcome. And inside here, of course, let's define our tags for the texts and the translate pipe, and we're gonna have the start page dot left side dot title part 1. So like title part 1 like this.